And the reason I like to start with her fringe section is sometimes I just prefer to start with the area of most impact first. So you really want to determine that length, and that will also help guide you because the rest of the haircut kind of has to flow into those front pieces, right? So you're gonna have to determine if you're making a drastic change in your one length trim, that would be the moment where you would start here instead of starting here. If they have a lot of hair that they're taking off and they're taking that length all the way up, you're gonna really want to probably start there because that's gonna be the most area of impact is right here. Sectioning in general, when you're thinking about what sections to take, you want to think about where that hair is living. So this hair is falling down. Because when you force hair to do things it doesn't want to do, that's when your client starts to get styling issues. I'm going to show you from the front the sectioning, then we'll turn her around so you can see my cutting angle. And the way that I like her about 80% damp. So about 80% of the moisture left in the hair. So holding it straight out, 90 degrees from her head, combing from each side, making sure that both sides are equally going into the center, or you're going to have one side longer than the other. And this is where I'm really over directing this section to create more length in the hair right behind my previous section. I kind of use the jaw as like a reference point, knowing that that shortest point is at her chin. I kind of like look at her jaw, I look at the angle, and then I look underneath to see where that hair is. Using kind of her jaw as my guide and the hair from the underneath as my guide. Flipping my hand upside down, opening my shears. It's kind of just like, you're like, yeah, like do you throw your hair? Because a lot of clients, I feel, just kind of thinning this out a little more. I want to know that when she's wearing her hair down in its natural form, this is where these layers are going to be. So keeping this corner is so important because that's the piece. Imagine when somebody pulls their hair forward, they don't have to grab from the back of their hair to be like, these are the lengths of my hair. So after that section is done, you can go for one more section, which I will do, or you can create that same exact section on the other side. So you can comb, 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 and then something else pops out that you're like, oh, maybe I'll just connect that a little bit more without touching any of those lengths. You always want to make sure your client is facing square to the mirror so that the square that you're creating back here is actually square and not lopsided. So what I'm going to do is I'm really looking at the lengths down here and how thick the hair is down here that I'm cutting, and that's how I determine my sectioning. The finer the hair, you can typically get away with it, but also you want to think about the fact that the finer the hair, every cut you do really matters because that's the only hair that they have, right? And so if you cut it crazy, you know, there's definitely a point of no return on a client that has finer hair. So I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to analyze where I want that length. The length in the front is just about here, and that was my guide. And that's the point where you really use your artistry and you feel the hair, you let the hair speak to you, and how it's going to kind of create these points for your client on their own without you encouraging it or helping it. All right, so then we'll let down the rest of the hair and just connect it all through before we move on to her layers. Bringing what's in front kind of back, giving it a nice little spritz just on the ends here where I'm working. So I'm using these little baby wispy hairs to kind of like add one more layer of texture to what's already living there. Do you need to create more of like a square layer that cuts like into the ends more? Do you want those layers to sit on top of the hair and preserve as much of the fullness through the underneath as possible? If somebody like values the thickness of their hair and they feel like there's just a few strands on the end and they have all these fabulous layers, but they really value the thickness of their hair. And if I wanted to take away this fullness, I'd most likely I'd section off this crown area and create some concave layers underneath that are disconnected from these top layers, preserving the lengths here. So that's a key thing if you have a really heavy client that you need to create more and more and more shattered layers. What I mean by concave layers is you would be bringing out We're not gonna do this on her. It's all with the intention, because the bigger the sections you get, the more of the concave you're gonna get, where it's shorter in the middle, longer on the edges, which is actually what we're going for. So you can actually take a little bit of a bigger section, because what happens is when you over direct the outside of those sections to the center, you're getting short to long. Bring your hand up, and now I'm gonna let the hair fall forward and just kind of cut points. So let me show you what that looks like from her facing you, so you know that this over here, this section over here, is getting pulled all the way to the center, just like that. So now I'll show you from this front angle what the over direction looks like on that first section. So I'm taking a section right next to the center section on the other side. So make sure your comb is, you can comb towards you only just to kind of gather the hair, but when you're combing the section, comb away from your body, in right behind it and up. And you're taking these little scooping sections, and you just want to refine it enough to where your cutting line isn't, you know that it's kind of that even cutting line. If you do want to check your section, you just take a horizontal section across the entire top of that of your back, holding it out at this same cutting angle, which was straight out from the head. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take from the center, just gonna gather all of her hair, and now I'm gonna elevate this out at a 90 down here. So I'm still letting those ends fall away, but see that corner that you kept? I think this part is missed a lot of the time, and it just adds such great texture to the curl and the overall style afterwards. You always want to think about the style afterwards, because that's what your client's ultimately thinking about. The sides are pretty simple because you've already cut away so much of the hair here, so much of the hair in the back. Now you're just connecting it through. A little sliver of hair from the back, a little section from the front. You're using the back as your guide, combing the hair up, over directing the hair back, straight out from the head, elbow up, cutting those. And I use that to guide my blow dry, so I'm going to use a flat brush, but based on the natural curl pattern that she already has to kind of accentuate. So we're going to start in on the fringe, and we're just going to follow the exact same kind of sectioning pattern and flow that we had with the haircut, but we're going to be even more loose about it. What I do with my comb is I hold it on the very end to really get, I don't even have my comb here where it's kind of getting in the way. So just how we took like section by section going back, I'm just going to roll this one out this way so that I can kind of come in with my shears and scoop out some really defined points here. Combing it into my hand, rolling it out as if I'm styling it this way, spreading those hairs out a bit, coming in and getting those points really nice and defined. Don't be afraid of it. Bringing it forward, kind of like flailing it out just a bit, giving yourself tons and tons of room to see the hair. So you can really see how the haircut instantly starts coming to life once you start the point cutting. Bringing it all the way up to the same place, the same elevation in the same place that you cut it, and bringing that up so I can really see it. And then I typically recomb. Elevate it straight up. Allow lots of room. Fan it out. Look at where you've already accentuated those peaks and accentuate it again right there. But if I am creating this kind of massive change, wet to dry, cutting it wet and then dry is what my go-to move would be. Maybe the shape is there, but there's just, I really want to cut seeing their hair dry and seeing all of that natural texture. So once you've done that, and actually sometimes I'll even take that same section and create a little bit of internal layers if I feel like their hair's too thick. And I hope that you really enjoyed yourself and that you really feel like this information was insanely valuable to you and that you're able to take your investment and turn it into just something that really adds value to every client in every situation, every day in the salon.